we have to understand that failure is the thing. That's how you learn. A little kid doesn't just get up and go run a race from, like you have to fall. Like that's how you do it. I think as soon as you realize that failure isn't your identity, then you're no longer like bound to it anymore. You're going to fail. You're going to fail at stuff all the time. It doesn't define who you are. It means you need to do it better,
Welcome to the No One Ever Told Me podcast, where we talk about the things that no one ever tells you that you really need to know to be successful and to thrive in business and in leadership. On this episode, we're going back to the music business, but this time it's with Grammy-winning audio engineer Nathan Dantzler. Nathan is the owner of the HitLab, a mastering studio with a team of engineers. And even though he collaborates with hit-making artists, Nathan keeps his focus on growing his business and aiming to create a culture of excellence that sets the standard for quality in the industry. Nathan, welcome to the show. Let's jump in.
Yeah, man. How you doing?
Good. You've got some really special ears. You hear things that most mortal humans can't hear. So in your professional opinion, what are some of the best sounding records of all times?
Oh, man. Best or most interesting? Because best, those aren't always the same thing.
Fair.
I don't know, man. It depends on the genre. I like stuff with low end. I love stuff with lots of bass. So I love the new Billie Eilish stuff. I think that sounds great. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine, John Castelli, is a really good mixer. He's doing tons of great mixes. That's good.
You got anything old and iconic?
Yeah. I know this is not an audio podcast, but I like Mars Volta drum sounds back in the day. So, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it depends on the record, man.
Yeah,
depends on the record. Yeah, Tommy Sims, Tommy Sims, which was recorded in the building that we're in right now.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's a good story. We're talking about the things that no one ever told successful people as they've achieved some modicum of success in their life. And I love your story. For people that don't know us, we both grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and kind of made the move to Nashville around a similar time. Mm-hmm. But I love your story. So maybe take us back to your beginning in the music industry, in the recording industry, and how that brought you to MTSU and eventually to the building we're in right now.
Yeah. Well, I've always been kind of a dork. And since I was a little kid, building speakers and playing music, being a young kid, and then got into recording just for my own band, basically. So we would have cassette 4-track recorders and do all that kind of stuff. And then my high school had a mentorship program where it was half day at school, a few days a week, and then you worked at a vocational job. So I worked at a recording studio with the idea that I would record my band there for free. Got into that, and of course it's just small town. It's not a real thing. But at the time it seemed really crazy. So I did that, and then without knowing it, I think producing bands. But I didn't know what producing was, But I knew I wanted to get into it. And then during that time in high school, I was looking through album credits of my favorite albums. And I remember just seeing names of different albums of people that I albums that I liked, seeing who did it. And so I would get on, this is late 90s, I would get on AOL and search for them. And I contacted them. But there was a guy, Todd Robbins, who was like, yeah, man, come to Nashville. Let's meet up or whatever. So I remember I played him what I was working on in my car, and I'm a high schooler, and he's worked on all these serious albums, but he kind of took me under his wing, and he was like, hey, you should come back up again. And I'm like, cool. So he started letting me sit in on sessions that he was working on. So then he was working on label projects, and one of the very first sessions was in this building in Studio B right there. He was mixing this band called Stereo Deluxe and on a Neve console. And that day, his assistant, his name was Drew Bowman. It was Drew Bowman's very first day assisting. He had just finished interning and was first day assisting, his first gig. So I was kind of Drew's assistant, the assistant's assistant, just kind of helping bring coffee or whatever. And at that point I was hooked, totally wanting to do this. And so, parents want you to go to school. So MTSU, Middle Tennessee State University, had a recording program, and I got into that. But I quickly realized that you had to have all A's and B's in your classes just to get into actually being in a studio. But I already was spending all my time here at this studio with,
right.
Neves and SSLs, all the top huge artists in the world, everybody. And so I failed everything. I think I passed scuba diving. There was a scuba diving class. And so, because basically like everyone would go to school for 4 years and then have this like disillusioned view that like, hey, then I'm going to be in the record business. And they did, but I saw what it really was, which is you go to school and then you need to like be an intern and clean toilets and serve people, and that mattered more. And so by that point in time, I knew the staff at the studio then pretty well from seeing them every day. And so I was like, let me come clean toilets. I'll work for free. So I did that and started just bypassed the school thing and went straight into
You found a hack. You
internship.
4 years.
Yeah, I guess so.
So many people have a perception of what a pathway towards their like ultimate career, ultimate goal looks
Right.
like. And you had like the wherewithal as a teenager to go, hang on a second. I think there's a way around this. And you ended up in this studio we're in right now. It's called Sound Kitchen, which is kind of crazy. So best you can remember, because this was probably like 20-something years ago.
Yeah.
What were some of the big records that were cut in this building?
Oh gosh, man, there were a lot. This building is the half that we're in right now. We're in like one of the offices here, but this half of the building is Studio A and Studio B, which was built I think in like the mid '90s, and then late '90s was the rest of it on the other side. And I remember there was this group of dudes that was like Aaliyah's camp that did like a lot of hip hop stuff.
Okay.
And they were here on this side of the building. And the speakers that they had I don't know if those are even still in there anymore, but they used to have these big, huge studio monitors. And they weren't enough for these guys. So they brought in like massive PA system like you would have at a concert inside the studio. And you could feel it rattling out in the parking lot, like every time they'd hit a kick drum, So they had everything, man. They had that, and it was like Garth Brooks and Trisha Yearwood and Faith Hill and Shania Twain and all those kind of country records. But then pop stuff, it was, I can't remember, man. Yeah, it was basically everybody, man. All the A-list, everybody was here.
This was it?
Yeah, I mean, it was 7 studios, and every day was another thing, and we had to do all the, artist stuff. They want the room this temperature with this kind of water bottle with the white M&Ms. And,
So the stories are true.
Yeah. So, and I mean, and the whole place too was like, there was like ashtrays and people would smoke. And so you'd have to like watch for someone to come back from a smoke break and then go out and remove the cigarette and then scoop out the sand and replace it with brand new sand and then like stamp it,
Meticulous.
Every drink in the refrigerator, so the label's facing the right direction. You never sharpen a pencil or you just use a new one every time, So it was like very 5-star, kind of service back then.
Top of the line. Absolutely. So you went from like high school recording bands, kind of bypassed the college thing, and ended up saying, okay, I'll start at the bottom in one of the best studios in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA. From like a pride standpoint, did you feel like, oh man, I gotta really kind of humble myself and take this lowly job?
No.
Or are you just happy to be around it?
No, I mean, no, not at that point, not at all, because you're around the most talented people in the world, So that would be harder for me to do now,
Sure.
To start back over. But when you're 18 or 19, no, man, it was amazing, Okay. It was super inspiring to be around all these people working on these records, Well,
continue the story a little bit. So you spent a couple years here.
Yeah.
And then what happened after that?
Well, through that, I started being an assistant engineer. Well, so I went from interning to like being on staff here and doing a lot of the tech stuff and maintaining the consoles and lots of things having to do with studio operations. And then through that, you're spent every day with different people in the studio. And so started assisting on different projects and then developed relationships with a lot of those people. And then just in being an assistant engineer for a number of years, every time you go to lunch, you're going with an A&R guy or record label or whatever. And you get to know them and just let them know that like, man, the next time you have a band that needs a demo, I can work here at this studio. At the time, it was thousands of dollars a day, Mm-hmm. It's like, I can do it for free. Just let me do it, And so did demos for bands. And then there were like radio remixes was a thing back then. So like a rock band would like make their album or whatever, and they pick the single. Well, then for different radio station formats, you'd basically like neuter the song, like you replace the guitars with the piano for an adult contemporary station or any of those things. And so I told him, I was like, next time you're doing a radio remix, hire whoever you're going to have do it, and then let me do it for free and see if I can beat it, And so did that, and one of those went like number one, and then that allowed me to work with this other band, and then I started doing a lot of stuff with them. And then they started a record label, so I started producing all these other bands under their record label, and then that led to some of those being hits, and then from those traveling to England and working over there, and then just kind of just kept snowballing.
You weren't like a door kicker downer. You wouldn't kick down doors in the rooms you wanted to be in, but you would follow the open ones and you would recognize closed ones. But you would
the thing is though, is that, I think when I first started, it was like, let me knock on the doors because you don't know where to go. Mm-hmm. But once you're in a community, like at the time, what was here, you kind of see how things operate. And you see the guys that come in right off, fresh off the boat or whatever, and they're clueless and they don't understand kind of the social dynamic of how that works, But it's like, man, when you're around a group of people and you can kind of pick up on the social cues, you understand that it's, especially in the music industry, man, it's about being a good hang. It's about being reliable. It's about doing any of those things. And so if you do that every day, man, you just keep doing it. And, it's hard to find people that are passionate, like that care, about what they're doing, show up on time, always give more than everyone else, It's like if you do that, it's a recipe for opportunity,
Would 25-year-old Nathan have said you were an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You knew what that meant and you kind of were pursuing that?
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a creative endeavor. So you're mixing records, you're remixing singles, producing bands as well, but you've got a back-end business that supports all this. So you've got expenses, you've got revenue.
You're talking about back then, right?
Yeah, back then.
Okay, so just to clarify, I don't do any of those things anymore. Correct. Right. I own a company called the HitLab, and we are a mastering house. So we master records.
And I can't wait to talk about that transition in just a second. Yeah. Who taught you about the business side of what you were doing?
Honestly,
the creative side you had.
Nobody really knows what they're doing. Like in the music industry, everybody's clueless, you see what your friends are doing and you see some of those things, but it wasn't very good, it was, to this day, I know so many musicians, they're keeping, receipts in shoe boxes and like, it's not organized at all, So, at that point it was just take everything you can get and then figure it out, but I had no clue what I was doing. Yeah.
Now, I don't want to fast forward through too much of the story because I really love the story. But eventually this took you out of Nashville and into California. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
I moved out there in 2010, I think.
The day of the Nashville flood,
That's right. That's right. Yep. Worked out there for a bit and I moved back here. I guess it was only 5 years. Yeah, I moved back here in 2015. So when I moved there, I never thought I would leave. I loved Los Angeles. Okay. I was all in, I decided to move back.
Talk about the culture differences, like from a business standpoint and from a creative standpoint.
Well, Nashville has some of the most talented musicians in the world. In fact, I would argue probably is the most talented musicians in the world of anywhere. Because of that, there's a lot of emphasis on how good you are at your craft. And so that's a good thing. That's a good thing to be good at your craft. But it can I see this happen a lot in community. You can see people that kind of gravitate toward bitterness if they see someone else that's not as talented as they are or as someone else, and them kind of thinking almost like, we all know American Idol, whoever wins is not the most popular singer, but it's almost that kind of view on the music industry. Like, well, the best people should be the ones, But the reality is that success it's not just how talented you are. It's like a pizza and there's one slice. One slice is talent. Mm-hmm. But there's also who there's networking, there's the right time and the right place. There's the things you do with your business and how you operate, and there's so many variables that go into it, and just one of those slices is talent, And so in Los Angeles, there's also lots of talented people, of course, some of the most talented people in the world, but there's a little bit more emphasis on who you know. It's a little bit more on the networking side of it. There you'll see people that are really good at like networking with people and hustling. It's a little more of a hustler kind of thing, The currency is like relationships, not talent. They're both important in both places. There's a slight, I would say, it's almost like a tilt. It's just like it tilts one way in Nashville versus how it does there.
That makes sense. How long did it take you to kind of acclimate to that new environment?
Well, it's weird. I grew up in the South and, my parents are super sweet and always kind of been raised to, be a good guy and all that, and it's a little weird. Like you open the door for someone and they kind of look at you like you're trying to like scam them for something, or whatever. I met my wife in Los Angeles and some of my best friends out there, and I love that city. It's great. And there's so many great people there. But as a whole, the thing I think I don't like about the city, which is one of the reasons I moved back, is that some people move to Nashville for music or for their career But some people do it because there's good schools or because they want to work at a healthcare job or something else. And in Los Angeles, most people move there just to be famous. Everyone is very focused on self, not everyone. Again, I shouldn't say that. A lot of people. And so, but you kind of see that in the culture a little bit more. The opportunities there are amazing in entertainment, and there's no place like it, if you want to do the right thing. But it does come at a cost, And so for me, that cost analysis just didn't line up anymore with who I am,
Let me jump out of your story for a second.
Yeah.
There's always different components to our leadership. And I've always said, ever since I've known, he's like, man, Nathan's a visionary. He sees how something should be before anybody else knows it's a problem. And so some of those funny stories are like, I remember one time we were recording a record at your place. There was like a Jeep taken all the way down, just to the frame. Mm-hmm. And then you put it back together. So like, have you always been a tinkerer and like, hey, I can improve this. I can make this better. I see a better opportunity than what is currently there.
So that's a curse, by the way, because you can't let go of it. I've gotten better at it. But a lot of that came from just growing up poor.
Okay. Talk about that.
We didn't have any money growing up, But like my personality type is like, I like being thorough and really detailed and going in and getting things right. But we never had the money to have the right or the nice thing. And so you've got to just create it, Yeah. And so I think that's where a lot of that came from is like, but then it becomes a curse because a lot of times you start doing things yourself. You should just be paying someone else to do.
Well, I mean, you bought a foreclosed house in Franklin.
Yeah.
And like me and some friends were helping you move an engineered beam into the attic so you could take a wall. It's like,
I found a picture of that the other day, by the way.
Shouldn't somebody who knows what they're doing be doing this?
Yeah,
like, no, we got this. It's fine.
Yeah. I talked to an architect. Yeah, they said it was good. Yeah, I talked to an architect.
But I love that because something that I've found that I really admire in other leaders is just the ability to go figure something out. Like, they are often not playbooks for what we're supposed to do next in life. We're like, man, I got to take a next step. I'm not sure what to do. You can ask people's advice. You could get mentors. But on some level, you've got to trust your instinct and just go do it.
Right.
And you've always had that quality. It's like, okay, let's go do this.
Well, the thing is, though, man, I think for me, some of that, too, is like sometimes you hire someone to do something and then you're like, if that guy can do it, I can do it. You know what I mean? Like, if he can do it, I can figure it out, I think for me, a lot of times I see how some people will do a said thing and I'm like, that doesn't really make sense. I know a better way we could do that, And so I guess for me, I'm not scared of failing. I don't care about that. You know what I mean?
We got to stop and talk about that because one of my questions was, we so often learn more from failure than we do success.
Right.
So you've had a 20-year plus career in the music business, which is a difficult business to thrive in.
Lots of failure.
Tell us about those failures.
Uncountable amounts of failures. Yeah.
Any stories you could share with us?
Dude, every day, all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. But I mean, I think the thing is, though, is that we think that we have to understand that failure is the thing. That's how you learn. A little kid doesn't just get up and go run a race from, like you have to fall. Like that's how you do it. I think as soon as you realize that failure isn't your identity, then you're no longer like bound to it anymore. You're going to fail. You're going to fail at stuff all the time. That doesn't define who you are. It means you need to do it better.
That's good.
So, yeah.
Let's jump back into your story. So you moved back to Nashville. Had you made the switch in your career from kind of producing to mastering?
Yeah.
And just for our listeners who may not understand the recording industry, talk about what mastering is.
Yeah. Well, producing is like kind of like the director of a film. You oversee the project, all the details of it from top to bottom, and then it gets mixed. Sometimes the producer does that. Sometimes they don't. And then the last step is mastering, which is kind of the overall way it sounds. Yeah, I had made a number of albums that we poured our heart and soul into, and then I just didn't like how the mastering turned out. And so there were a few times where I just kind of do it yourself kind of thing, like, well, maybe I can beat it, And then other friends had me master their thing. And so there was a point where I was doing both for a while. At some point, I decided to just specialize and focus just in mastering.
What about your business and like work-life balance changed after that? Because I feel like on the production side of things, my guess is it gets really intense for
way out of balance.
Okay, talk about that for a second.
Yeah, man, it's like producing records, man. There's a big cost to it. You're emotionally 100% in. Every part of your soul and being is into making this product, which is good. And there's a high that comes from that when you get it right. and when it works. But everything else in your life suffers. So your health, your relationships, finances, your time, all of it, Mastering is not as involved, but it's more zoomed out. So I really like where I'm at now because I get to work on a lot of different records every day. When I think about mastering before, when I was working with people, it just kind of went to some invisible guy somewhere and he kind of did something to it that made it sound like something. And I remember being young and craving like, well, this guy listens to records every day. I wish he would give me maybe some feedback or some something to learn off of. And so I feel like I've been sort of building my business now on like leveraging my past experience as a producer and a mixer and having done all of those things into a mastering engineer. So now when I'm working with other young people, we have something that I don't really see a lot of other people doing, which is a more collaborative relationship with the people I work with.
Okay.
So rather than them just sending something to me and making it sound like something, we'll talk about the hook and maybe the arrangement and some of the other different stuff, and like other things they could do. And we'll even talk about like their diet and how it's affecting their hearing and their work life and what they're doing with their time. And, and so
a collaboration on the final piece of what a record sound like, in your experience, really didn't exist much for you as a producer.
Yeah, I mean, it does with some people, but I mean, it's just the industry's changed since then.
Yeah.
Used to people would go to studios like this and record an album, and then it would go to a big mixer, and then it would go to a mastering guy, and there was kind of a machine of how it worked. But now you've got people making records in bedrooms, that are number one hits. So yeah, it's not everything's turned upside down.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that anymore,
Well, one thing I love about the HitLab Instagram page is you guys produce some really great content that's not specifically about your industry.
Right.
One thing I saw the other day was about this idea of planting seeds. And I was like, man, no matter what industry you're in, entrepreneur, executive, everyday leader, 9 to 5, or no matter what it is, we can't escape the reality that we live in a sowing and reaping world. Like,
right.
You don't plant apple seeds and get oranges.
Right.
So you're planting something that's going to result in something down the road. I mean, when you guys put that content out, what were you thinking about as a business owner?
I guess to back up, in our world of audio, there's number one, I personally don't like social media. I just don't like it. I don't like the self-promotion. I don't like
necessary evil.
Yeah, well, you could say that. I'm not saying I don't like what it could be. I'm just saying I don't like what it is, or has been, I should say. So I was trying to think with our company, like, man, in my camp of people, very rarely do we talk a lot about like specifics. I try to stay more zoomed out a lot of the time. Or it's almost like if you're free diving, like if we're going to go talk about something really, really detailed, let's hold our breath, go underwater, do it real quick, and then come back up for air. Like just spend as little time as possible down in that stuff. Don't get bogged in the details, try to stay zoomed out. We've been having these conversations for a long time about all these topics. And I was like, man, we should do some content. So work with a friend of mine, Michael, who does our social media, Michael Morgan. And we just went through a bunch of workshops and talked about a bunch of different topics and a bunch of different ideas. And so then I'll kind of get an idea, a theme sort of for a month, just even internally, just as our camp, as kind of what we talk about. And then I'll write some stuff down and then he illustrates it and we put it out. Yeah. But yeah, as far as like the planting seed thing goes, that was, I think, was that our most recent one? I think so.
You told a story that was like really great about like an 8-year gap from an action
that
right.
led
to a consequence.
Yeah. Well, so I'll say this. I think that if you're trying to, I think too many people are trying to look at the end result and go for that. But like, you don't know what the end result is going to be. No one knows what your end result is going to be. And so that's not a good thing, because if you aim for it, you're probably not going to get it. And you could be robbing yourself of another better result that you didn't know that you could get.
Oh, that's good.
Right? So like, you don't even know that that's there. So for me, it's almost like my wife and I, we bought land a couple years ago now. So we got this big, huge field you can look at. And you look out on all this grass, and it's like, man, every relationship, every single person I work with, it's just like planting a seed. You plant a seed right there and you water it and you give it sunshine and you plant another one and you plant another one. And every record I work on, every A&R I work with, every person I encounter with, you're planting a seed with those people. And so some of those will grow and then a deer will come by and eat it and it's gone. Other ones like might turn into a tree and then lightning strikes it, and you don't know which ones are going to be the healthy ones yet. You know what I mean? And so, but at some point, one of those is going to start to grow up and it's going to start to have branches, and other relationships are going to come off of that relationship. And then each of those is going to have branches that has other relationships come off of those relationships. And eventually somewhere there's some fruit at the end, And so you don't know, without being able to tell the future, you don't know what seeds are going to turn into fruit one day, And so that's why I think that it's really important to treat, because, and like I'm old enough now to like have seen people that I kind of discounted early on, like, well, that guy. And then later you're like, oh man, he's the guy now or whatever. And then other people that you thought were a sure bet and now they're not doing it, whatever the thing is anymore, So I think that you got to like give everybody the benefit of the doubt and not only not burn bridges, but like intentionally always do your best at whatever you're doing with everyone, I mean, there's only so much time, so you've got to figure out how to, do your time. But whenever you are working with someone on anything, don't ever just do enough to get by. Always do the most you can,
I like to talk about competency because I feel like that's something you're passionate about is quality and competency. And there's risk in the music business, right? I mean, you can spend on the label side, you can spend a ton of money on a record that never recoups the cost you have in it, right? And there's risk in all sorts of places we probably can't even think about right now in this conversation. But I think one thing that kind of helps keep risk at bay is competency and kind of attention to those details and making sure you're delivering. So over the course of 20 years in this business, what were those moments where you just kind of exponentially grew in your competencies?
They're all from failure every time.
Okay, that's really good. Talk about that.
Well, I mean, you could fill any number of topics. It can be from losing files because a backup wasn't happening. And so then from that point on, that makes you step up your backup stuff and figure out what's going on, or confusion with an invoice, and understanding, well, we got to figure out how to do the billing. And so every time there's a failure, it's a red flag. And that means you need to identify that problem. And then that's when you become really competent.
What you're doing, the product you're delivering for your clients is top shelf. It's really some of the best stuff that's out there. Who are you still learning from? Because I know you're a guy that's curiosity is always a part of your nature. You want to know more. How does this work? Can I do this better? So who are you learning from? How are you still discovering new techniques and new ways to do stuff?
Well, the good news is you get to work with different people every day. So, we collaborate on records all the time. It's all the time. It's always a conversation about what different people are doing, Okay. I wouldn't say that there's like anyone that does what I do that I like have as like a mentor type role. I wish I would have had more of that. A lot of it was kind of figuring it out. I feel like I'm trying to do that for the people that work for me now.
Okay. So how recently have you kind of added staff to the HitLab? Because it was a one-man show for a little while.
Yeah.
And now you've got some employees.
Yep. It's been over the last couple of years. Okay. Yeah. So
well, how's that changed your workflow? How's that changed your business development now that you're kind of responsible for more than just yourself with the business?
Right. It was about trying to keep as much perspective as possible in what I'm working on and not getting hung up in the details. Here's the thing. So you have all these seeds and you have all these trees of people that you've worked with, They don't all grow at the same rate either. So some people you start with early on are wildly successful. Other people that started at the same time haven't gotten very far. Well, I don't want to ignore those relationships that maybe don't have the budget and they haven't seen as much success as the other ones, right? I don't want to do that, but I only have so much time. So for me, I can use that as a way to say, you only have this much budget. You only have this. You should work with Alex. He's my right-hand man. He's great. So that way I can still keep them in-house, keep them as a client. They can continue to work with someone who's great. It gives him an opportunity to like practice his skill and his craft and grow and continue to build those relationships. Because you never know. For some people, success happens day one. Some people it happens, day a million or whatever, And so, in fact, there's been a few clients that he's worked with that were old clients of mine that have started to blow up, which is great. But so I'm trying to leverage what we have in order to help him build a career, serve the clients that I've already been serving without neglecting them,
That's good.
And then allow me to be more intentional and focused with my time.
Another content piece that I saw on the HitLab's Instagram was about momentum and aim and identity.
Yeah.
And I love this because so many of us get our identity wrapped up in the thing we do.
Right.
But I think in the creative industries, like
Right.
the music business, it's really difficult to separate who I am from what I do.
Right.
So talk about some of that content. What did you learn and what are you helping other people learn through that stuff?
So often everyone's identity is tied to, these days it's politics or it's your income or your status or whatever it is. And those are not who you are. That's not who you are. You are not those things. Those are things you have. They're, attributes, but they're not who you are. It is hard though when people are working on records because you are putting yourself into the work. And a lot of times the work reflects who you are. But then the problem with that is that when your identity is so closely tied to that, your identity is either going to soar or tank depending on the success of the work, even though the work isn't you. It's almost like an avatar of you, in the creative field, So like you put everything you've got into it. And if it's a number one record, then you feel on top of the world, Right. But if it fails, then you feel like a failure. And I think that it's important to pour yourself into the work. That's what makes it good. But at the end of the day, it's like you have to like put everything you have into it and then let it go. And then just let it go. And it does. Now it's independent of you. So it's almost like you're like raising this little mini me child of yours that's like your creative thing. And then once it's time to release it to the world, it's not in your control anymore, And so I think that, if you tie your identity to your work or any of those things, then even if it's money, if it's whatever, right? Like you could be broke tomorrow. You never know what's going to happen. Like you can't let your identity be tied to those things, because it's just not who you are.
This sounds like a lesson you've learned, like maybe
Right.
maybe the hard way.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly though, I see it in other friends, I see it in people I know that go through really deep depression when stuff doesn't go well, They didn't change. Their circumstances changed. But I've seen friends of mine go really depressed, and I've seen other friends get really cocky and arrogant when they get a lot of success and they become better than the other people around them, the people that have been there for them the whole time. And both of those are because they got their identity tied to something else.
Do you find that humility is a virtue that lives in this industry?
Yeah. Some of the most influential people for me were the most humble.
Okay.
So in fact, there was one guy back in the big studio back there. He produced, I don't want to say names on a podcast.
It's great. Don't.
Yeah, but huge producer guy, really, really well-known guy, lots of big stuff. And I remember I was like 20, I think. I was an assistant, and we go to lunch in his Ferrari. And I was like, drop some knowledge on me, man. Give me something. And because he seemed different than everyone else. Like he had money, but it's almost like he didn't. It almost felt like it was like not real, And he said, money isn't the root of all evil. All money does is it exaggerates what you already are, So if you're humble and giving, then people are going to see how humble and giving you are. And if you're selfish, people are going to see how selfish you are, It's just an amplifier, Yeah, man, there's so many people in the industry that are great, Okay. There's plenty that aren't, but there's lots of guys like that,
You talked about AIM a little while ago, and your definition of success or where I want to go is here, but along the way that shifts a little bit.
Right.
So how do you define success now that's different than how you defined it 5 or maybe 10 or 15 years ago?
Well, I mean, I think, okay, you could break this down a lot. I don't think success is like winning an award or getting recognition or having record sales or even, a ton of money. For me, it's doing something that you love and it providing your needs so that you don't have to do anything else. Anything on top of that's bonus, right?
Yeah.
And then, but even then, it's like if you're able to not only meet your needs that you have, but then now you have the ability to grow what you've done and now have more people that work for you and serve more people with it. And so as long as I think success is, it's not like, I think that we always think of there's like this, like you look up at a mountain peak and you're like, that's success up there. But like the reality is that you're never at the top of you don't know where the top of the peak is. You don't even know. It could be that it already happened for both of us and it's already done. But you know what I mean? It's like you don't know. It's like the stock market. Like you can look back in the past at the chart and see where the peak was, but you don't know where the peak is going to be. Right. And so I don't worry too much about that, right? Because it's like, man, we're along the journey. All we can do right now is make good decisions, and we can do our best to change our little part of the world however we can for the better. And then in my experience, though, is like if you do that every day, day in and day out with integrity, it's going to work out just fine.
That's great.
It's going to be great.
I love that.
You know?
You don't strike me as a person who's surprised by much because you're a really bright guy. So I doubt surprises happen often. But if you can look back over the 20 years in the business,
right?
What's maybe the one or couple things that no one ever told you that you're like, man, if I'd have known that then,
right,
I would have done this now.
Right. Gosh, there's so many of those things. In our world, especially in like the engineering part of audio, there's so much emphasis on the technical, and the rabbit hole goes deep, you know? And there's a lot of conversation that happens about all of that. I don't feel like it really should be talked about that much. I feel like if someone wanted to go to school for music, they should instead go to school for psychology. Because at the end of the day, it's about relationships. It's about how you can learn all of that stuff. The technical isn't hard to learn. The hard part to learn is navigating relationships and how to, all of the other things that go around it. But yeah, I mean, like, especially in our field, man, it's just, there's so much, everyone's talking about gear all the time and tricks. And they all think that there's like this, they think that like their record isn't number one or successful because they just need this magic little thing. They just need this trick. They just need this whatever. And yeah, maybe, probably not. That's probably not the problem, you know? The longer I've done this, like I work with some people now, like there's this one songwriter guy I work with a bunch out in LA, and he's just unbelievable, man. This guy's once in a generation talented, and he'll put his iPhone down on the table, hit voice memo, hit record, and then he'll move you to tears with it, you know, put it out on Spotify, and just everyone's blown away, you know? That perspective, you know, would be healthy if more people had talked about that matters more than the actual nitty-gritty details that's easy to get caught up in, you know?
Does music still move you, like emotionally? Do you hear stuff you still get? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So even after like being in like way behind the curtain and seeing the depths of despair.
Most of it doesn't, but when it does, it does. Yeah, okay. Right. Yeah.
Does that renew purpose? Does that renew passion? Do you just kind of like, does it ring like a tuning fork?
Well, I mean, no, I crave it, man.
Yeah.
You know, and honestly, there's so much content being put out right now in everything, in television and in YouTube and in music and in podcast, all of it. Yeah. That sometimes I wonder, like, did anyone pause to ask, should we? Should we put something out? Is it like, do we need to put it out? I don't know, you know, because granted, everybody is, and you never know. I mean, the other theory is, I guess you could just throw something at the wall and see if it sticks, you know, which that's cool. I'm down for that. But I feel like there's a lot of people that are making the music they think that people want to hear rather than what's special about them inside of them. Yeah. And that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear something that sounds like someone else. Like, I want to hear something fresh and unique. I want to hear you artist. I want to hear your voice, you know?
That's good.
Yeah.
If you fast forward like 10, 15 years kind of down the road, what are some of your hopes for the HitLab? What are your hopes for your career kind of moving forward?
I want to keep growing at what we're doing. I want to have, I don't really want it to be, it's still sort of been based around my career, and I don't really want it to be that, you know? I almost want in the future one day that like there was this guy one time, his name was Nathan, you know, or whatever. And like it's like, maybe it's like in some backstory, you know? But I would rather it be more of a, kind of like, it's like what's the design studio where all the like Pixar people went, you know? I'm trying to remember the name of that classroom.
I could Google it right now.
Yeah. But like one of those things where it's like, oh, they came from this camp, you know?
Yeah.
Like I want it to be more of a camp and more of a mindset where like, if someone comes from our camp, then you know that they're legit. You know what I mean? Like that's the more important thing. That's what I would rather care about.
I love that. So you're talking about legacy is what you're talking about.
But yeah, not even again about me, but I just want to create something where people can thrive creatively, technically, in service, just a way to keep kind of amping up, what's possible. Because I mean, it's hard. We're talking about, you know, some more higher level topics rather than the nitty gritty, but there's a lot of nitty gritty in our industry that I think people are doing the wrong way, and I think there's ways that records can sound a lot better. And we try however we can without, like, one of the things when I work with people, one of the things a lot of times I do is I try to find their discomfort, where that is. And I don't really want to avoid someone's discomfort. Like, a lot of times they're like, we want to make this painless. I don't really think like that. I want to find where they're uncomfortable and push them one click past it. Like, make them a little bit more uncomfortable if it sees growth, because that's usually where growth happens. Growth usually happens right over into that. If you got order and chaos, it's not in order. When you're in order, you're comfortable and you're stagnant. If it's too much chaos, your life's a mess. But as soon as you push into that chaos side a little bit too much, a lot of times when I'm working with people, we'll try to find kind of that discomfort in that thing, and then just poke it a little bit. Just poke it. And then sometimes they might be mad at you for the moment, but long term, you've now got a client for life. When, you know what I mean? When you really ask people the difficult questions that make them rethink what they're doing, and then they see improvement from it, there's no reason they would ever go anywhere else.
Gosh. Well, that's really good. And it makes me want to ask more questions.
Go for it.
So,
yeah.
Go back to maybe the days where you're mixing records,
right?
Where opinions come in the room after you deliver a product.
Right.
I was always curious about this. So
right.
You deliver a mix to an artist, to an A&R guy, whatever, and you say, let's have feedback.
Right.
That's got to be one of the most challenging things of that, because you've delivered what you think is the best representation of that song.
Right.
How do you internalize their feedback and take it and not let it be personal?
Yeah. So the younger, more immature me would take offense to feedback. The older, more mature me, hopefully, I don't anymore. Now I try to understand their intention. It's all about translation. And so, especially in mixing, usually, like, if you're the mixer and you're the one who's doing it, you're the one that's the technically proficient one. And then the record label people or whatever are the ones, or the artist is giving you feedback. Now, their feedback isn't technical. So sometimes they'll say something and you have to understand their intention first, not what they're actually saying. So someone will say, we want to do this. They're probably using the wrong word and they're saying the wrong thing or whatever. But at that point, if I don't know what they're saying, I have to figure out what is it that they're wanting to hear and why. And then sometimes the why allows me to go, okay, because the other thing that I think happens is a lot of times when people are explaining something, they will try to come up with the solution for you rather than let you come up with the solution. And so for me, if the end goal is, we need to find out what the actual end goal is first, and then we can backtrace and figure out how to get there. And so a lot of times people give you feedback and they're trying to give you the directions on how to get there, when really I'm just concerned on where they want to go.
I'll figure the path out. Just tell me where.
Or maybe your path is right, but first we need to understand what the destination is, And so as soon as you do that, sometimes you can go, like, let's say it's in a song, and let's say they're like, hey, we want the vocal to be brighter, right? It's too dark. We want it to be brighter. And you're thinking, well, if we make it brighter, it's going to be harsh and you need to be able to turn this up really loud or whatever. And so then if I talk to their intentions and do all these different things, I'm realizing that, they want the song to feel like the chorus is sparkling or whatever, like whatever the thing is, then I can go, okay, well, maybe we can do that, not by making the vocal brighter, but by darkening these other things up and creating a contrast, and then making sure that, and really it's just this one note and this one word. That's what they want to highlight. This is the part they feel is special about the song. And so then I can figure out how to best get to where they want, So I think feedback, but at the end of the day though, the other thing that's hard is when you're starting out, you're working with people that usually you're all starting out together early on. Nobody knows what they're doing. So people always give feedback because they feel like they should, or they have opinions. But once you start working with really talented people and your career grows and their career grows, you really need to trust their feedback, because they're successful for a reason and they have a vision. And my job isn't to imprint me on their work. My job is to help them have their vision be in the work. Right. And so I have to trust the instincts of the people that I'm serving, And so, yeah, there are tons of times where the feedback is horrendous and can ruin something. But the chances are if the feedback is bad and it's going to ruin it, then they're going to ruin it somewhere else anyway, So just do it. But if you're really working with like a visionary type person that really, really has a special something, you got to try to understand how to interpret it, understand their intentions, and then do everything you can to enable that. Because there's times where I've done that and I thought what I had was great. As soon as you let your pride and ego get out of the way, and then it's just about serving what they want, you realize there's this whole other magical thing that you didn't even see, So
that's so good.
Yeah.
Let's talk about momentum for a second, because that was
you mentioned
also,
it. That's my favorite topic.
Well, we're there. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, man. So I think that whether it's running a business or in your life or anything, man, it's so easy to get caught up in the details, the day-to-day details. And as you know, man, I'm a very detailed person. But getting too caught up on details it's a problem, man. It's not good because it slows you down, and momentum is your best friend. It's like an avalanche, And so I see, for instance, okay, we'll give a tale of two different producers. I have some friends in category A and some friends in category B. Category A, you'll see a guy who's like, I have to produce something, and this has to be the best thing that's ever happened because this is going to be my moment for the world to see my work and how talented I am. So they'll spend 6 months on one song, right? And they'll just do go all in, and they're trying to do everything the best it can possibly be done. The other guy says, I'm going to do one song a day, every day for 6 months. And he doesn't worry about it too much, and he just keeps doing it and doing it and doing it. On 6 months and one day, you compare the work of those two people. The second song of the first guy and the 61st song of the second guy. No doubt in my mind, every time the guy that did all the songs over and over again is going to be better. You get better by failing and by doing it and failing, but not circling back to the failure too much, Because if you're like, oh man, let's say you're painting a room and you've got a little nick or a thing, and you go back and you fix it, and you keep going back, fix it, and you keep whatever. Like, you could have painted 100 rooms by now and gotten really fast and efficient and good and understood how to do work efficiently, all those things. And so, but I think that it's also just a thing in your brain, man. Your brain needs to keep dreaming. It needs to keep moving forward. It needs to keep creating. You can't just stay stuck in one thing. You get stuck in this loop, right? And you watch people get stuck in this vicious circle of a loop because they're just trying to perfect something. And that's cool. But sometimes the idea and the other thing that it does with momentum, though, is it gives you perspective, because sometimes you don't know that you're circling around a deadbeat. It's not a winner at all. It's not a good idea. And you don't even know that it's not a good idea because you're too zoomed in,
right.
Yeah, it's like right in your face. And so only when you've had thousands of ideas that you flushed out do you know the good ones, And so you see the same thing happen with people in writer's block, right? They're like, I'm stuck. I don't know what to write. It's like, you're thinking about it too much. Just start writing. You don't have to edit it. You don't have to just write. Just put some stuff down. Just start going. It can be complete garbage. The purpose is get moving, start writing, start doing it, start creating. And so that's kind of with the AIM thing, though. It's the same thing with AIM. It's like, man, you don't have to know the exact perch of the mountain that you're aiming toward. You just need to go, hey, I want to be on top of a mountain. So just start going up. Just go up. Just start going. And you don't know what's going to happen, Like, at any point in time, things will probably change, But it's just important, I think, to keep moving.
Do you have any momentum specifics for HitLab, like in the last couple of years, like where you've seen kind of almost like compound interest for the business, where things are just kind of amplifying, moving forward?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, working with a team, there's times where we will have a system that we need to have in place or something. And I talk with my guys, and there might be something like, well, but it's not ideal yet. We need to wait until we have this, whatever. And it's like, okay, well, then we'll add it later. Let's just keep moving. Let's keep it going. Let's keep it going. And then a lot of times people make up excuses of why something's not perfect, and they use that as a reason not to move forward in their life, right? I could easily say, like, I don't have this thing that I need, or I'm still waiting on this, so I shouldn't do anything until I have that because it's not ideal. But the thing is it's never ideal. It is never ideal. No situation is ideal. That's right. So you operate with what you have, and you do the maximum you can with it. And then it's easier to go back and refine it later. When a tool comes available that you didn't have at the time, well, then you can go back and implement that if it's a good idea. But chances are half the time you're going to be on a whole nother thing now. You're going to be, it's evolved into a whole nother thing.
So smart. Man, I've enjoyed this so much. Just kind of the memory lane stuff, going down to, back to the production days, but then hearing how you've developed as a business owner and how you've shaped your career to get it to a place where you're really happy with a lot of elements in your life. I applaud what you're doing.
Thanks, dude. Yeah.
Big time. So thanks for making the drive down to Sound Kitchen in Franklin and coming back.
It's been a long time since I've been here. Yeah,
it's crazy. Stomping grounds.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here, man. I really
dude. Of course,
it.
man. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
It's really one of life's great pleasures to watch friends and people you've known for a long time achieve some success. As you can tell from Nathan's story, these things don't usually happen overnight. And one of my favorite things from this interview is how Nathan has built his business to a point where he can get perspective. Perspective gives us the ability to put our focus on the things that matter most, not on the technical, but on the growth mindset ideas like planting seeds, choosing an aim, and building momentum. So make sure you check out more Nathan's stuff on the HitLab's Instagram. And as always, please rate, share, and subscribe this podcast, and make sure you join us for the next conversation.